Hey class, Mr. Handry here. For today's lesson, we're going to be taking a look at section 6.1, which is going to deal with slope-intercept form. Now, for today's lesson, we only have one learning goal. And our learning goal for today is that you will be able to write an equation in slope-intercept form and be able to graph the equation. So for the next three sections, we're going to continue our look at linear equations or linear functions, meaning straight lines. And for the next three sections, we're specifically going to look at different ways that we can write a linear function, whether it be slope-intercept form, point slope, or standard form. Today, we're just going to take a look at slope-intercept. Now, slope-intercept is hopefully something you have had some exposure to in the past, and slope-intercept for us today is going to be this idea of y equals mx plus b. So slope-intercept form of an equation, if a line has a slope m and a y-intercept 0, b, then the line is described by the equation y equals mx plus b. So this is what our equations are going to look like at our end result, and what we're going to use today is this y equals mx plus b. X and y just refer to our points xy. M is going to be our slope, our rise over run. And then b is going to be our y-intercept, so where it crosses the y-axis. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about how to write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form, given some information. And then we're going to talk about how to graph it and then utilize it in some story problems. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get into example 1 today, which is going to ask us to write the equation of each line in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to go ahead and move this on up so we have a little more room to work, and then we'll get started with example 1a. Alright, for example 1a, we have the slope is 3, and the point 2, 5 is on the line. Now, we have to write an equation of the line in slope-intercept form. So that means I need to write this as y equals mx plus b. When I get to my final end result, x and y have to be just x and y. So, for example, an example of an equation of what we're looking for would be like y equals 4x plus 2. So we have to use something that's for our slope, m, in this case it would be 4, and then our y-intercept, b, which in this case is 2. So we need to be able to find or fill in numbers for our slope and our y-intercept. Once I know what m and b are, I can plug them in, and I can have my final result that looks like this. So that is our goal, and that's what we're going to hope to find and get down to at our final answer. So for example 1a, like I said, it has a slope of 3, and the point 2, 5 is on the line. So anytime that they give you your slope and a point on the line, know that your slope, if they ever tell you, that is your m. So if they tell you your slope, you already have 1/2 of the stuff you have to do. Now, if they were to tell you the y-intercept, or where it crosses the y-axis, or tell you what b equals, you would have your second part, and then you would be done. In this case, they just tell us a point. So how we are going to write our equation in y equals mx plus b form for the line that goes through this point and that has the slope is we're going to call this my x and my y. And what we're going to do is take the equation y equals mx plus b. We have to figure out what my y-intercept is. So to figure out our y-intercept, we're going to plug in my value for m and then my x and y. This is going to allow me to then solve for b, because we're going to have 5 equals 3 times 2 plus b. I don't know what b is yet, so we're not going to plug anything in for that spot. Now, all we need to do is solve for b. If I have 5 equals 3 times 2 plus b, I need to multiply these together first. So we have 5 equals 6 plus b. And then we just have to solve for b. So that means you're going to take the number that's with b, this 6 plus b, and we're going to subtract it to the other side. So we're going to take 5 and subtract it by 6, and I get -1. So my b value in this case is -1. So -1 equals b. At this point, I know my slope is 3, so my m is 3, and I know my b, or my y-intercept, is -1. I have everything I need for my equation. So then my equation is just y equals 3x minus 1. And that is our answer for part A. So if they give you the slope and they give you a point, you need to plug in your slope and your point x and y into the equation y equals mx plus b, solve for b, and you are good to go. So let's go ahead and take a look at another one just to give us more practice. If we take a look at b, we have our slope is -1, and the point 3, 2 is on the line. So again, they tell me my slope, my m value, and they tell me my first coordinate point, which is x and y. Now, they don't tell me what my b value is or what my y-intercept is, so we have to go through and figure out what b equals. So again, we're going to take our y equals mx plus b. We're going to take the stuff that we know, which our slope is -1, and our x and y are 3 and 2. So we're going to have 2 equals -1 times 3 plus b. So now we just have to go through and solve for b. So we're going to multiply these two together first. So we have 2 equals -3 plus b. And then all we have to do here is move this -3 to the other side. We can either subtract the -3, or because this is a -3, we can do the opposite, which is to add. So we would just do 2 plus 3, and we get 5 for our b value. So 5 equals b. I now have my m, I have my b, so now I can write it in y equals mx plus b form, which is y equals -1x plus 5. And that is our answer for part B. Now, something that, if you recall back to middle school, is anytime that you have a 1 in front of x, you can always drop it off. So we could have this as y equals -x plus 5, and that would be the same thing. If it helps to keep it straight, you can keep it as a -1x. It means the same thing as y equals -x plus 5. Alright, so that is how you do example 1, part A and B. Now, the same thing's going to carry over to part C and D. It's just they don't tell us our slope, yet they tell us the 2 points that the line has to go through. So we have to go through and figure out our slope first, and then we can go through and do what we just did for parts A and B. So I'm going to go ahead and move this on up. And what I want you to recall, this is flashing back to section 5.3 when we talked about rate of change in slope. Remember, slope is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that is our slope formula. So if you have 2 points, an x1, y1, x2, y2, we can plug it into our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 to discover our slope. And then we can finish off the problem like we did with parts A and B. So first thing is they tell us the line passes through 0, 5 and 2, 13. So they don't tell me my slope, they don't tell me my y-intercept, so we need to go through and identify our slope first, then we can identify our y-intercept. So we're going to call this my x1, y1, and then my x2, y2. So now that I have my x1, y1, x2, y2, we're going to plug it into the slope formula to figure out what my m is. So m equals, it's y2 minus y1, so it's going to be 13 minus 5. And then that's going to be over x2 minus x1, so 2 minus 0. And then just like we did with slope before, you simplify the top, so we're going to do 13 minus 5, and we get 8. Simplify the bottom, so 2 minus 0, and we get 2. So we have 8 over 2, and that's going to simplify down to 4. So that means my m is 4. So I've now figured out my slope, and while I would love to tell you that, boom, we're done and that's our final answer, to get our final answer, we have to go through and figure out our y-intercept first. So how we are going to go through and do this is we're going to take our equation, y equals mx plus b again, I know my slope, so I know that that's 4. I don't know what my y-intercept is yet, so we need to choose one of these 2 points to plug in for x and y. Now, either 2 points that you choose, this will work and work out just fine. I always suggest you use the smallest points available, or any one that has 0. Because this one has 0, I'm going to use 0, 5. If you use 213, you will end up with the same result if you do your math correctly. So if we plug everything in, my 5 is going to be my y. So this is going to be 5 equals, my slope is 4, and then my x is 0. So I have 5 equals 4 times 0 plus b. Again, 5 is my y, 4 is my m, and 0 is my x. First step, you go through and multiply these 2 numbers. If we do 4 times 0, we get 0. Now, by all means, you can write this as 5 equals 0 plus b, but anything plus 0 is just itself. So that means we get 5 to equal b. So I have now successfully figured out my slope, which was 4. I figured out my y-intercept, which in this case is 5. So I now know that my equation is y equals 4x plus 5. And that is my answer. So if they give you 2 points, find your slope first. Once you have your slope, choose one of your points, one of these 2, plug it in for x and y, use your slope, solve for b, you have your m and your b, and you're good to go. So we've now talked about 2 ways that we can go through and write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form, whether you've been given the slope in a point or you've been given 2 points. Now before we move on to graphing and practicing that, I do want to take a look at D just to give us more practice with what I just did in terms of finding the slope and then finding the y-intercept. So for this problem, we have, and this is for D, the line passes through the points 1, 4 and 3, 18. So that's where our line has to go through for our equation. Again, we had to find slope first. So we're going to take this as our x1, y1, and then our x2, y2. And we're going to plug that in for our slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So m equals, it's y2 minus y1, so 18 minus 4, over x2 minus x1, so that's 3 minus 1. And then we just have to go through and simplify the top and the bottom, and then take whatever result we have, and that would be our slope. So we're going to do 18 minus 4. which gives us 14. And then if I do 3 minus 1, I end up with 2. So 14 divided by 2 gives me 7. So 7 is going to be my slope for this problem. And that's going to allow me to then go through and find my y-intercept. So that's the first part of this. My second part is I then need to take my equation, y equals mx plus b. I'm going to plug my m in and then choose one of my points. Doesn't matter which 2 points you choose. You can either choose 1, 4 or 3, 18. That is totally up to you. I'm going to suggest we use 1, 4 because smaller numbers are nicer when we're going through and doing simple calculations. Alright, so I'm using 1, 4 as my x and y. And so my y is going to be 4. So it's 4 equals, my m is 7, and then my x is 1. So I have 4 equals 7 times 1 plus b. So if we do 7 times 1, we end up with 7, so it's 4 equals 7 plus b. And then because this is a positive 7, to move it to the other side, that means I have to subtract it. So we're going to do 4 minus 7, and I end up with negative 3. So negative 3 equals b. So I now have my slope, and I now have my y-intercept. So I have my m and my b for y equals mx plus b. So then my equation is y equals 7x minus 3. And that is our answer for part D. Alright, so that is going to be a majority of what you're going to be looking at and doing today, where you have to write equations of lines in slope-intercept form, whether you are given a slope and a point or you're given 2 points. I highly suggest when you're working on your homework that you either have the completed notes to reference or you come back to the video for another reference. Alright, so that is how we're going to write equations. The next thing that we are going to take a look at is going through and graphing based off slope-intercept form. So example 2, they already give us the equation. We just have to go through and graph it. So for these problems, what I want you to understand is before, when we have talked about graphing, we have talked about making an XY table. So I would have an XY table over here, and then we would go through and plug in 3 or 4 points, plug them in here, figure out our Y, and then plot the points. Today, I am going to show you our first shortcut in graphing lines. So with that said, what I want you to think back to is y equals mx plus b for a second. If our equation is in this form, y equals mx plus b, y has to be alone, and you need your x and your other number to be on the other side. My m and my b refer to as my slope and my y-intercept. So recall that m is my slope and b is my y-intercept. Remember, slope is rise over run. Y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So from each of your equations, you need to identify what your slope and your y-intercept are. So if we look at y equals 5x minus 4, the number attached to x is your slope. The number not attached to x is your y-intercept. So if we have y equals 5x minus 4, my slope, my m value, is 5, and my b value, or my y-intercept, is negative 4. I'm not just going to call it 4, but I'm going to call it negative 4 because this is minus 4. Now that I know these two things, this is how you do your first part of your shortcut. The first thing you're going to do is graph your y-intercept. So you're going to take this -4. Remember, y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So this line is going to cross the y-axis at -4. So that is going to be my first point that I plot. So my first point is at -4. Next, you're going to take your slope. Now remember that slope is rise over run. Remember, also with rise over run, if you have a positive number, it goes to the right. If you have a negative number, you go to the left. Positive for run is, sorry, I messed that up. Okay, for rise, if it's a positive number, it goes up. If it's a negative number, it goes down. For the run, we're always going to go to the right, and I will show you that when we get to another example. So with our slope, we know our slope is 5, but if you notice slope is a fraction, anytime you have a whole number, we're just going to consider that as that number over 1. So this is 5 over 1. That means I need to rise 5 and run 1. Now, key thing to keep in mind, positive means you go up, negative means you go down. So it's a positive 5, so we're going to go up 5 units from the -4. So we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it's over 1, so it means we go to the right 1. And that is our second point. All you need is 2 points to draw a line. So I have my 2 points, I connect my dots, and I have my line. And that is your shortcut to graphing. So you don't have to use XY tables. I know I kind of drew this out a little bit longer, but is really just to kind of set this up so you understood how and what parts are coming from where. So let's take a look at B so we can run through one a little bit faster. We have y equals -1/3 x plus 2. The number on x is our slope, so that's -1/3. And then my y-intercept is the number not attached to x, so that's 2. It's a positive 2 because it's plus 2. So my m is -1/3 and my b is 2. So again, the first thing you're going to take is your b value. This is your y-intercept, so that is where it crosses the y-axis. Because it's positive 2, we go up to 2 on the y-axis. That is our first point. Then we're going to take our slope, -1/3, and we're going to go from this point. Because this is -1/3, we're going to go down 1 to here. Now, the tricky thing is I want you to always think of slope as you're going up or down, and always go to the right. Don't think about going to the left. Try to go to the right. So we go down 1 to the right, 1, 2, 3. You have your second point, and then we can go through and construct my line like such. And that is how we're going to graph using slope-intercept form using the shortcut. Now, we can reverse this direction if we think the negative on the bottom and positive on top. That means we would go up 1, and because the negative would then be on the bottom, we'd go back 1, 2, 3, and that would also end up on the line. But I like to always think of it as either up or down and always to the right, or you could always think of it as moving up and then it's right or left. So that is how you graph it using the shortcut. Before we kind of jump into our third example for the day, I do want to take a look at C or D, because C or D carries the same idea that we need to go through and graph it. It's just that it's not in slope-intercept form. So the way that I suggest you do this is that you get the equation into slope-intercept form, then use that information to help you graph the line. Alright, so if we look at C, we have 2x plus 3y equals 6. So we need to get that into y equals form. This is referred to as standard form, and we'll talk about that in section 6.3. To get it into slope-intercept form, we first need to move this x over to the other side. Because this is a positive 2x, that means I need to subtract it to both sides. And when I subtract it to both sides, it goes away on the left, so I get 3y equals, I want the x to be first, so it's negative 2x plus 6. Now we're really close to what we're used to at looking for today. The next thing is I need to get rid of the 3 from the y. So that means I'm going to divide 3, and I have to divide 3 to all parts of the problem. So if I divide 3 to all the parts, I get y equals. You can't divide 2 by 3 and get a whole number, you get a decimal. So we're going to leave it as negative 2/3 x. Fractions are fine today because as you saw with slope, it actually works out well. And then if I do 6 divided by 3, I get plus 2. So that means my m is negative 2/3 and my b is 2. So now that I have my m and I have my b, we can go through and graph this line. Plot your y-intercept first, so we start at 2, and then my slope is negative 2/3, so that means we go down 2, so down 1, 2, and to the right 3, 1, 2, 3. And I have my second point, thus giving me my line, where we could go up 2, 1, 2, and then back 3, so 1, 2, 3. Either way, it works out, and we will end up having both of our points for our line. And that is how you go through and set up these problems on the back. So if they don't give it to you in y equals form, just know that you have to solve it for y equals, and then once you have that, identify your m and your b, and then you can go through and graph it. If we look at d here real quick, just because it's helpful to see more examples of it. We have negative 8x plus 2y equals 4. And I hope this fits. Okay. Again, your first step is to move the x to the other side. So that means we're going to add 8x over. So that cancels it on the left. And we end up with 2y equals 8x plus 4. And at this point, all I have to do is just divide 2 to every part. So then I get y equals 4x plus 2. So I've now gone through, I set it up in slope-intercept form. I know my slope is 4, or 4 over 1. And my y-intercept is 2. So that means I plot my first point at 2, and then you can go up 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right 1, or you can go down 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left 1. Now that I have my points, I just go through and connect my dots, and I have my line like such. And that is how we're going to go through and graph slope-intercept form. Once you've identified your slope and your y-intercept, remember to plot your y-intercept first. So you're going to take your b value, plot it on the y-axis, then take your slope, rise over run, so this goes down 2 to the right 3, and you have your second point. Again, if you have a negative slope, you go down and then to the right. If you have a positive slope, you go up and to the right. Always think moving to the right, positive goes up, negative goes down. All right, so that is it for example 2. Now, example 3 is going to continue with slope-intercept, but we now have some story problems to deal with. So let's take a look at these. All right, example 3. For part A, we have Katie's figure skating school offers introductory lessons at $45 per session. There is also a registration fee of $65, and we need to write a linear equation in slope-intercept form that represents the situation. So we're going to write something in the form of y equals mx plus b. Now, everything we have talked about up to this point, we have talked about the fact that you need to have your slope and your y-intercept. Now, when we're talking about a story problem, your slope is something that is a rate of something per something. Your y-intercept is going to be an initial or a starting value for whatever it may be. Now, because Katie's figure skating school charges $45 per session, this is our rate that every session it's $45. There is a one-time registration fee of $65. I don't keep paying $65. You pay it once and you're done. So that needs to be my b value. So my equation is going to be y equals 45x, because it's 45 times every session, plus the one-time fee of $65. So your equation is y equals 45x plus 65. So that is the first part. The second part asks us, you want to take at least 10 lessons. Can you pay for those lessons using a $565 gift card? If so, how much money, if any, will be left on the gift certificate? If not, explain why. So, you want to take at least 10 lessons and you have a gift certificate of $565. Is that enough to pay for it? So the way we're going to figure this out is you want to take 10 lessons. So we're going to take 10 and plug it in for x, because it's $45 per lesson, so 45 times however many lessons. So what we're going to do is take our equation, y equals 45x, and we're going to plug 10 in for x, plus the 65. So what we're going to do is figure out how much it cost for 10 lessons and see if we have enough money to use the gift card, or gift certificate, sorry. So if we do 45 times 10 plus 65, we end up with 515. So we get y to equal 515. So that is the first part. So the question is, how much, can we pay for the 10 lessons using a $565 gift certificate? Well, if I have $565, can I pay $515? I can. So my answer is yes. And then it wants to know how much money is left on their gift certificate. So if I have $565 and it costs $515, that means you just take $565, subtract it by $515, and we end up with $50 left. And that is going to be our answer for part A. Okay, so that is your first story problem. The second one is going to carry a similar idea. It's just not set up the exact same way. So we're going to run through and solve this one as well. If you feel comfortable and you want to go on to the homework, by all means go ahead from this point. This is our final problem for the lesson. But if you'd like to see this done, stick around. All right, for part B, it says identify the slope and y-intercept and interpret their meaning. We need to write an equation and use it to solve the problem below about the Lordstown ski resort chairlift. Now, a chairlift descends from a mountain top to pick up skiers at the bottom. The height in feet of the chairlift is a linear function of time in minutes since it begins descending, shown in the graph. Find the height of the chairlift 2 minutes after it begins descending. Now, you could look at this and sit there and go, okay, 2 minutes, well, that hits the graph here, and then you can make an estimate. But we want an exact. To do that, we need to write an equation for this. Now, they give us 2 points on the graph, this 0, 5,400, and then 4, 2,400. Now, they don't tell me my slope, and they don't tell me my y-intercept, so we have to go through and figure out our slope first. So remember, our slope is going to be this y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, I'm going to call this my x1, y1, and then my x2, y2. So for slope, it's y2 minus y1, so it's 2,400 minus 5,400 over x2 minus x1, so that's going to be over 4 minus 0. So 2,400 minus 5,400 over 4 minus 0. So if we go through and plug this in, we get 2,400 minus 5,400, and we end up with negative 3,000 over 4. So if we divide that by 4, we end up with negative 750. So negative 750 is going to be my slope. Now, at this point, you could go through and plug it back into the equation y equals mx plus b to figure out your y-intercept. But since they gave us a graph, they have demonstrated what our y-intercept is. Remember, your y-intercept, or your b value, is where the graph crosses the y-axis, so where it crosses this line right here. We know where this graph intersects with the line, and that's at 5,400. So I know that my y-intercept is 5,400. So I now have my slope, which is negative 750. I have my y-intercept, which is 5,400. This negative 750 means that the chairlift is going down 750 feet per minute. This y-intercept means that the starting height of the chairlift is 5,400. So my equation is going to be y equals negative 750x plus 5,400. So that is the first part, writing our equation for this problem. The second part is we need to figure out the height of the chairlift 2 minutes after it begins descending. So that means I'm going to take this 2 and we're going to plug it in for x and figure out what y equals. So we have y equals negative 750 times 2 plus 5,400. So we're going to use our handy dandy calculator again. So we're going to do negative 750 times 2, and I didn't plug in the 2, times 2 plus 5,400, and I end up with 3,900 feet. And that is how high up the chairlift is after 2 minutes when it begins descending. That means that it has gone down 1,500 feet to this 3,900. And that is how you do part B. So, with that said, that is it for section 6.1 on slope-intercept form. I hope this video was helpful, and thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions, as always, please let me know next time you see me or send me an email. If you need any help, just let me know. And be sure to use your completed notes as you go through and do the homework. Use them as a reference. And that is all for today. So have a great day, and I'll talk to you guys later. All right, bye.